Well, this week in Spain, with the Blevins Franks conversation, I'm joined by Cathal Rochford, and we're going to look at various tax considerations you need to take into account when buying property in Spain. How are you, Cathal?
I'm very well, Howard. Enjoying the start of the summer. What about yourself? How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm keeping well, thank you very much. So, Cathal, what taxes do you pay when you purchase a Spanish property? And does Spain charge an annual council tax or similar?
So, yes, good question, Howard. So the first taxes you'll come across are those you pay on the purchase of the property itself. So in Spain, if you're buying a new build, you'll have VAT or IVA, which is at a rate of 10%. And you'll also pay some stamp duty on top of that, somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5%, depending on the regions and the circumstances. If you're buying a pre-owned property, which is the case in many cases, there's a property transfer tax, or in Spain it's called ITP, and it's generally between 7 and 10%, depending on the region. In fact, in the Balearic region where I'm based, it can reach as high as 11.5%. So it can be quite a heavy outlay of capital, and so buying property is certainly not a good asset to trade or to look to flip. So going forward, residential property is liable to an annual local council tax, or IBI or EB, as it's called here in Spain. And this is based on the official value of your property, the valor catastral, and paid by the occupier. Lastly, of course, you'll have notary and other legal costs as well to factor into the investment or the purchase.
And what about when you sell a property in Spain? What do people need to know about capital gains tax in Spain?
Yeah, so if you are buying your first Spanish property, you probably won't be thinking about capital gains tax right now, but it's good to be informed on how you will be taxed when the time comes to sell. In any case, if you're a tax resident in Spain, you'll also be liable for Spanish tax if you sell an overseas property. So the gain made on the sale of the property is added to your other investment income for the year and taxed at the savings income rate. So these range from 19 to 28% at various tiers. So if you as a Spanish resident are over 65 when you sell a property and this has been your main home, no tax is due provided certain requirements are met. If, on the other hand, you're younger than 65, you may also be eligible for this main home capital gains tax relief if you use the full proceeds of the home sale to buy another main home within Spain or the EU area within 2 years. If you're a non-resident in Spain, capital gains tax is charged at a flat rate of 19% for EU residents or 24% for non-EU residents. Finally, you may also have to pay what's called plusvalia when selling a property, and this local land tax is payable on the increase in the value of the land, excluding the buildings, and this amount varies according to the size of the population and the length of the ownership of the land in question.
What if you rent out Spanish property? What tax do you need to pay? And what's the national rental income tax? Is that sometimes charged here?
Yes, Howard. So if you rent out a Spanish property, you will of course pay income tax on the earnings or the income. Residents pay tax at the general scale rates of income tax, ranging between 19 and 49.5%, depending on the region where you're based. For long-term lets or rentals, you can get a 60% tax reduction against the net rental income also, so this can be quite advantageous. Tax for non-residents depend on where you live. For EU or EEA residents, you pay a flat 19% tax rate on net rental income after deduction of some expenses. But for non-EU or EEA residents, the rate is 24% on the gross rental income. And then, as you touched upon, the notional rental income, this is surprising to some people, but if you own a Spanish holiday home or property not used as your main home, tax is also payable on notional rental income for the period it is not rented out. This is generally based on 1.1% of the valor catastral, which is then taxed at income tax rates if you're a resident in Spain, or 19% if you're resident elsewhere in the EU, or 24% if you're resident outside of the EU.
Another annual tax applied in Spain is wealth tax. Should people take this into account when buying a property?
Indeed, one extra tax to be aware of is the wealth tax, as you touched upon. So though the impact varies considerably per region. Residents in Andalusia and Madrid do not pay the standard wealth tax here in Spain, and Murcia has increased the individual allowance to 3.7 million. And in the Balearic region where I'm based, they've increased the allowance for wealth tax to 3 million euros per person. For other areas, the individual allowance is 700,000, and all areas get a 300,000 euro allowance for their main home. So these are the individual allowances. So a couple could potentially have double this. Above this, wealth tax ranges from 0.2 to 3.5%, with some small variances across regions. So Spain currently imposes 2 annual wealth taxes: the standard wealth tax, which I've touched upon, and also a solidarity tax on large fortunes, though you just pay whichever one is higher, so you won't pay both wealth taxes. Wealth tax is levied on your worldwide wealth if you're a resident here in Spain, and on Spanish assets if you're a non-resident. So it's important to determine where you're resident in terms of assessing what type of wealth tax you'll pay, and if you'll pay on worldwide property or just Spanish property. A final point on this is that wealth tax applies on the equity level of the property in question, and it's usually based on the cost price and not the market value. And this can be quite a relief for people who have enjoyed, a large uplift on their Spanish property over many years. So you don't have to concern yourself with the current market value. It's usually assessed on the cost price, and you can also deduct any mortgage or debt off that as well.
Interesting. Do you have any other tax advice for people buying a property in Spain?
Yes, I would say it's crucial to understand the rules, laws, and possibilities to mitigate taxation. Property can be a great asset or investment asset, especially if, for example, if it's your main home. If you have a main home, you can the property can grow tax-free, and you can generally sell it tax-free in the future. So all of the growth can be, realized very efficiently. If not, and if you're buying an investment property, for example, taxes will be ever present and in fact growing. On acquisition, you'll pay the initial taxes, as I mentioned. During the life of the property holding, you'll pay income tax on the rental income, or even a notional income tax if it's not rented out. And of course, later on, you'll pay capital gains tax on the profit when selling the property. So it is very difficult to protect against tax with the property investment. There are, of course, many other factors aside from tax to consider, like the energy and time expense needed to manage a property and having looking after tenants and so forth, repair and maintenance costs, insurance, issues with the loss of a tenant or your property being vacant. And eventually as well, which is important, is the friction to sell a property is much higher because property is less of a liquid investment class, and it's quite inflexible when it comes to realizing capital from it. So I think it is very important to understand the tax dynamic and also the liquidity of the asset in question. Since we never know what the future holds, you also need to think ahead and consider how much tax your beneficiaries will pay if they inherit the property on your death, and or if you gift it to them during your lifetime. Spanish succession tax and gift tax is always payable on Spanish property, regardless of where you and your heirs are resident. This, of course, varies region by region, and some regions have greatly improved the succession tax picture. So it's worth assessing how this would work in your region of choice. At Blevins Franks, for almost 50 years now, we have a lot of experience in supporting expatriates here in Spain with specialist tax planning, as well as pensions, estate planning, investment management services. Our local advisors have the cross-border expertise to make sure your financial affairs are in order so that you can relax and enjoy your new home away from home here in Spain, and make sure that your taxes are as minimized as possible.
And I guess the website is the best first port of call.
Yes, absolutely. So have a look on our website. There's lots of very informative articles, podcasts, guides there, and even books that you can purchase from our website. Or even better is you can get in touch with one of our local advisors, depending where you live, be it France, Spain, Portugal, Mallorca, Costa del Sol. Get in touch. We've got local advisors in all of these regions, and we'd be happy to sit down with you, have a cup of coffee, and see how we can assist.
Many thanks. I think we'll talk again next week, Cathal.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Howard.